What's up, everyone? This is Lan here again with you, Cheeseheadz Weekly, and another episode. This is episode 9. So we've been getting continued support, although we've not had near as many listens as last week. Just with we did have a guest on the show the episode before last, and we had a lot of listens on that one. Not as many this time, so if we could bring that number up, that would be fantastic. And but we did get another voice message, which was great. Love voice message. We got one from Elijah about Joe Barry. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth here a little later on the show. We're going to bring Troy on the show again, follow up show. Like I just said, he was my guest on the show 2 weeks ago, and we're going to bring him on the show again to talk Rodgers, because guess what? The decision has been made as of Wednesday. But right quickly here, we got the Q&A and the polls on Spotify. I'd like to see some participation there. We didn't have as much participation in either of those this week either, and I want to see more of that, because that just kind of helps with the discussion. Whenever you're just doing a one man podcast, it's good to get lots of feedback from your audience, because there's not a whole lot of discussion unless you bring a guest on the show. So that is why it's great having a guest on the show, but it's also great if I can just get some stuff from you, some more voice messages as well, because that's kind of how we can have a little bit more of that discussion type stuff, and it gives me things to talk about that you all like. And so if I'm figuring out, if I can figure out what you all are wanting to look at, that's great, because then I can address the things that are most popular and that you guys are most interested in. So we do have the link in the description of every single episode to send in a voice message. It's very easy. You can send in whatever you want. Lately it's been a question, but just a topic you want me to address as well. Pretty much anything works. The show is available on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and iHeart Radio. The Q&A and polls are only on Spotify, though. New episodes every Tuesday. On Spotify, at least. I'm not sure about the other ones. You can hit the bell on Spotify to be notified when a new episode comes out, so you don't miss anything. And you can tell your friends about the show. Helps to get the word out. I've heard some people who have done that. In fact, Troy, who will be coming on the show here later, has done that. Has been telling people about the show, and that's fantastic. So, the more people we get the word out to, the more we can continue to build the show and make it better. And also, rating the show helps get the word out about the show as well. So that's always great. So yeah, should be a fun show. But before we get into it, before we get into the news, I would like to go over last week's poll. So I put polls out every week on Spotify along with the Q&As. And I vote on it every week myself. It's kind of fun. And so I voted this week. The question was, which of these veteran safeties do you think the Packers should go after in free agency? The options were Von Bell, Julian Love, Taylor Rapp, Juan Thornhill, John Johnson III. So at this time, we only have 3 options, I believe. Julian Love visited Seattle and then decided to sign with them. And then we have Juan Thornhill signed with the Cleveland Browns to kind of replace John Johnson III. And so we'll talk a little bit about that later with Troy as well. The recording with Troy happened last Thursday. So at that point, Julian Love was not signed yet. But I voted for him, and uh, Troy and I both um, think that would have been a good option for the Packers. But in the end, he probably would have cost too much anyway. So let's get into the news here. So I'm not going to do a ton of news since we have Troy on the show. The episode will definitely be longer. I'm talking some stuff with him about Aaron Rodgers, but he came on the Pat McAfee show at 1 p.m. Eastern Wednesday, and he said my intention is to play for the Jets in the 2023 season. So we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna get more in depth with that later on in the show when I get Troy on here again. So I'm not gonna get into that too much right now. But certainly this is what Packers fans are looking for. I will ask for your feedback most likely in the Q&As this week, but this is great. We're officially entering the new era, although the trade has not happened like I think a lot of us thought would happen right away. It did not, and it appears that they're not even really close. And it's pretty much a leverage situation right now. I feel like right now the Packers do have that leverage. They can wait about as long as they want, and because they have their guy, the Jets are desperate. They got to get Rodgers in the building to work with his receivers. Um, the thing is with the Jets, they don't even know if he's gonna come for the voluntary workouts. If he's gonna do that stuff, with the way he was with Green Bay last season. So I think the Jets are just desperate. I think they would like someone else more than Rodgers, but I think Woody Johnson is a lot behind this. Whenever you get an owner that wants to run the team, wants to win, you just gotta kind of listen to him. He's gonna push for something, and that's what you gotta go with. And I think the Jets overall have a pretty solid organization. I really like Joe Douglas, their GM, but I think it could be a mistake bringing in Rodgers. But I think the trade stuff is really being held up. I think the Packers, it seems like they want the Jets' first round pick. There was a report that came out from Tom Pelissero that they're not looking for multiple first round picks. I think they are looking for the Jets' 2023 first round pick, and then like maybe a conditional pick based on if Rodgers continues to play. But obviously the money is a big thing because he's going to be paid a lot, and so it's a question of who's paying him, who's taking the money, how they're going to split that up, and then also, of course, the compensation. I think the Jets really want to hold on to that first round pick. They don't want to give the Packers the first round pick for Rodgers. I don't really know what a fair price is, but obviously, if I'm the Packers, yeah, I want that first round pick. And if the Packers have that leverage, and it seems like they do, at least at this point, they can hold out on Rodgers. It's not like Rodgers is getting any more expensive. Uh, and they got their guy in the building under contract. So they're not, the Jets are the ones that are desperate, so maybe they'll be the ones trying to get a deal done so they can get Rodgers in the building and start that process, getting ready for the season, the start of the season. But I guess we'll see where that goes, and like I said, we'll talk about that a little bit more later. There has been some free agency news. I'm gonna just talk mainly just Packers news. So the Packers did re-sign safety Rudy Ford. Re-signed him on a one-year deal. I already mentioned they re-signed Keyshawn Nixon, which is fantastic. I said earlier in our free agency preview that I would be happy if they re-signed Ford. They did to a one-year deal. They also re-signed tight end Tyler Davis, so they're getting that veteran. They've liked Tyler Davis He's, I believe, an undrafted guy, but he's been a core special teamer this past year for Rich Bisaccia. And just a good veteran guy to have around. Just keep building the depth. That tight end position as they're looking to rebuild that position, especially since we got Robert Tunyon departing to the Bears. Dean Lowry agreed to terms with Minnesota. We also had Alan Lazard leaving to the Jets, which I do not think is a coincidence considering Rodgers is going there. Jaron Reed is reunited with the Seahawks, and he was drafted by the Seahawks, and then went to the Chiefs, went to the Packers. Now he's going back to the Seahawks. I would have liked if the Packers could have re-signed him, but you can only do so much when you got Rodgers on your cap. But they did sign two guys, safety Tarvarius Moore from the San Francisco 49ers. He was drafted by them in the third round in 2018. And so he should be a core special teamer and just building that depth in another need position for sure. And he definitely has a good chance to be a starter in that defense as well. And also a long snapper, Matt Orzik. I believe he came over from the Rams, won a Super Bowl ring, and he's been with them for 2 years. He came in to the NFL as the Jaguars long snapper in 2019. This is his sixth NFL team, so he's bounced around a lot. And Jack Coco was their long snapper last year. Don't know who it'll be this year. Not sure if that means he's going to be replacing Coco or what that's looking like, but we'll see what Rich Bisaccia thinks there. So we're gonna get into some stuff with Troy. That's about it for the Packers. They're not gonna don't have that big splash, but you can't really expect that with the cap. And we're gonna talk a little bit more about that here. We got my uncle Troy coming back on the show from Wisconsin, um, and he watches a few games a year of the Packers, I believe, in Green Bay. So he's he's followed the Packers for a long time. So let's get him on the show here and talk some football with him. All right. Well, we have finally got Rodgers' decision in after a long wait. He took it right down to the wire, and so Wednesday we were able to hear that decision. He announced it on the Pat McAfee show, and so we were. I decided we're gonna get Troy on the show again. We had a blast last time, and so we thought it'd be cool to do another show together, just talking about his answer, his decision, and maybe the upcoming trade that seems very likely to happen now that he has decided he wants to go to the Jets, and the Packers also want to move on. So yeah, we'll kind of talk about some of that stuff, what Roger said on the Pat McAfee show. But what do you kind of think of the whole thing? Do you think it's a good move for the Jets, good move for the Packers? Just kind of hand out some evaluations for each team, kind of the good and bad of everything.
Hey, well, thanks for having me on again, Landry. Yeah, great question. I think both sides are ready to move on, as they both have indicated. I think it's time. Um, it just seems, there's this strange holdup now, and it's just like, well, what's going to happen now? And every early reports that Rodgers was holding it up because he wanted to get all these players signed, and then well, no, now then he says on the Pat McAfee show, well, the Packers are holding it up. They're digging in their heels because it's overcompensation. So And I don't blame Green Bay for that. You know, you want to get a fair deal if you're going to trade an MVP quarterback, a guy that's won a Super Bowl, a guy that thinks he still can play at a high level, which in the right situation, maybe. But I think the Jets they're not getting a slouch, right? They're getting a really good quarterback. So, of course, the compensation would be a factor. But yeah, it was interesting that it doesn't surprise me that Rodgers announced it on the McAfee show and said that I think it was a move to kind of take it off him and put it on Green Bay, like, hey, you guys are holding this up. Everything Rodgers does, you know, is a purpose behind it. And I think it was to put
Yep.
the pressure on Green Bay to, you know, make a decision here. And we don't know what the Jets are offering Green Bay. But
Hmm.
if I'm a fan and if I'm the GM, look what Matt Stafford trade got for Detroit. I got two number ones, you know, out of the deal. Now, I'm not saying we'll get two number ones, but we should get at least one number one, which this year
I would
happens
hope
to
so.
be pick number 13. So, and we have a 15th round pick. So that gets really interesting when you start thinking about what you could gather there.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I definitely want to see them get as much out of that as possible. I did. There was a report from Tom Pelissero that they're not looking for multiple first round picks.
Mm-hmm.
I would still hope they could get one. I mean, I realize that the fact that Rodgers, I think what's different from the Matt Stafford trade, it would seem that Rodgers is a better player, but I think what's different is just the fact that Rodgers could retire. It might only be one season, and they also will likely have to eat a good bit of his salary cap, which is um, quite a large sum of money. So it's kind of an interesting situation, just figuring out who's going to um, who's going to pay for pay Rodgers, and how you're going to split that up, and then also the compensation in the trade. I think maybe the it would seem like the Jets don't really have that much better of a roster than Green Bay. Um, and I don't know if it's just I think maybe it's Rodgers was saying that it's the Packers who kind of wanted to move on, and we talked about it last time. Um, we were saying I asked the question um, if it would be even a possibility that the the Packers trade Rodgers if he wants to stay in Green Bay, or if he or if kind of if the power just lies with him. And it seems that's kind of what they did. They decided they wanted to move on. They told him that, and that at that point he was ready to retire, it seemed. And then for some reason, we don't really know the reason, but he's decided he's going to come back to the and play for the Jets. So I find that kind of interesting that the Packers were able to just go for it. They knew what they wanted to do as an organization, and they just kind of went for it. And I think it's a very good move. Uh, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I totally agree. I think that's spot on. I think, you know, when he left Lambeau Field, you remember that last game, he walked off the field. Randall Cobb was by his side. He looks
Yep.
up into the stands. He kind of points. He even said that he felt like that was like he wasn't coming back at that point, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and he felt like he was leaning towards retirement. His plan was, you know, get to the playoffs, win a Super Bowl, you know, go to this darkness retreat, you know, and come out and you know retire. And he said he was 90% sure that at that if that plan would have worked out, that he would have retired. Of course, they lose to Detroit, they don't go to the playoffs, and it's a little bit of a different story. So I think he still has that hunger and that passion to still play the game. And I don't think that probably ever really left him. You know, it's tough when you lose a game like that. And so initially that you
Yeah.
might think that, right? But he went into the darkness retreat, comes back out. Then he comes out, yep, I want to play. But he's smart. I mean, he knows what the Packers have in love, and he can see he was there when it went when the Favre situation came up to, and he was the guy that was waiting in the wings. Now it's kind of a similar story, and I think he knows Green Bay wants to move on and go to Love. He can probably see that just based on just verbally how things are communicated within the building in Green Bay. You know, things that are said to one another. And if it, like I said on the last show, I haven't heard Green Bay come out and say, yeah, we want him back. They haven't said that this time. And so, and with good reason. I think, there's a reporter for the Packers, Bob McGinn, who's said that I think Green Bay is, and he's a respected reporter, by the way, but he said, I think Green Bay is just kind of tired of just kind of how Rodgers handled things, like he's demanding with players. Like he wanted
Yeah.
Randall Cobb on the team. He wanted Mercedes Lewis on the team. He's wanted, I think, Odell Beckham Jr. on the team. Some we've done, some we haven't done. And I think um, today now, or last Wednesday when he talked on Pat McAfee's show, there was a debate about bringing players in um, from the past to the Jets roster now. Of course, the Jets just signed Alan Lazard to a 4-year, $44 million deal. 20 million of it's guaranteed. And when I saw that contract, I'm thinking, man, oh man, the, I like Alan Lazard, but he's probably a number 4 receiver, maybe a 3. Um, the guy is, I don't know. That's just my personal opinion. I just don't think he brought much to the table. He didn't make our team that mark. He wasn't a number 1 for sure. Wasn't a number 1.
Yeah.
He's a
Yep.
piece. He's not a 1. So the Jets sign him. So all that to say is, Rodgers definitely he's influencing who the Jets are signing, and I
Yes.
wouldn't be surprised if Cobb comes in there. Is Randall Cobb and Alan Lazar going to put you over the edge? I don't think so. Odell Beckham, he wants 20 million a year to play. Um, he hasn't played football for a while. What's he going to be like? So I think there's a lot of question marks, and I think Green Bay just didn't want to go that direction and have to deal with that again. They did that last year, didn't work out. We didn't make the playoffs. Um, it did not work out. And I think they realize that and they're smart to say, all right, we're not doing that again. We're going to go a different direction. And again, we don't want to lose uh, um, Jordan Love at all. So I think they look at Jordan Love as, I think they're excited. They gush about him. They're like, man, this guy could be special. And so they're definitely making the right move. So I think it's good for both sides. Again, it just comes down, when's this going to happen? And you're right, salary cap is a big part of it. If the Packers wait till June 1st for this, or if they wait, they could. And I was reading where the salary cap hit would be broken up over 2 years if they trade him after June 1st. So I don't think Green Bay's in any hurry to trade him. They know they're going to trade him. They can wait till June 1st if they want to. That's not going to affect their draft, right? It's just, I mean, it could affect their draft in the sense of compensation for what the Jets give to them. It
Hmm.
could affect them that way. But I think the true reality of when this will happen, it will be in April. It will be before the draft because obviously we want draft picks from the Jets, hopefully a 2023 draft pick. And then we'll see. Now, if they don't get a 1 for him, one could argue and say, what if Elijah Moore was thrown into the deal? Because if you think they bring in Lazard, they bring in Cobb, they bring
Hmm.
in Beckham, that's 3 wide receivers that are now on the roster that they didn't have last year. So they can't keep the wide receiver room becomes full. So they
Yeah.
got Mims, Barrios, Moore. Um, so I think they're not going to get rid of Garrett Wilson, obviously. So I think Moore to me seems like a logic. Oh, Corey Davis too. You got him. So
Yeah.
I think if you can land one of those 2 receivers, and then maybe a 1 the following year, maybe that's what happens. But I think if you don't get a 1 this year, then you have to get a rookie, or a first or second year player that has good upside, like an Elijah Moore.
Yeah. I've been thinking Elijah Moore would seem like the best kind
Hmm.
of player to trade. He wanted out at one point, and so I think a change of scenery would help him out, and I think the Packers would love to have him. Um,
You know what's interesting about that? He wants out. Guess who he got in a fight with? Matt LaFleur's brother with
yeah,
the Jets, right? So that's
yeah,
who his
that's
spat was
true.
with. So,
Yeah,
but Rodgers had spats with LaFleur too. I mean, you do that as a
Hmm.
player, and you apologize, get over it, and you move on because everybody's a
Yeah.
competitor. But yeah, I think that would be. He did want out. You're right. So I think that would be a great move.
Yeah, they're kind of looking for the slot wide receiver.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's the type of wide receiver they're looking for. Um, so about that wish list, Rodgers had a few things to say about that.
Hmm.
Um, he he said he basically said what people were reporting about this um was pretty wrong. He said that's so ridiculous. It's so stupid to think that I would do that, number one. Now, did they ask me about certain guys that I've played with over the years? Of course. Did I talk glowingly about my teammates that I love? Yeah. So he says, and then he went on to say, talk about it as it being reported that he was making demands, and which is not exactly how it was reported to begin with, but he thought it was, um, he made it sound like Um, again, he was blasting reporters, and again, it was ESPN reporters, Diana Rossini and Adam Schefter. Adam
Hmm.
Schefter's kind of taken a lot from him, especially, and so it's kind of interesting. But uh, do you think what Rodgers is saying is actually true? Because um, he's he doesn't want people to think certain things about him, that's for sure. And earlier he kind of wanted people to think that he had the vaccine, um, and when he really didn't, and that whole situation was kind of interesting as well. So his wish list, just to be clear, included, according to the reports, Randall Cobb, Alan Lazard, Mercedes Lewis, and Odell Beckham Jr. So, uh, and from what I've heard, the Jets have showed interest in Mercedes Lewis. They have already signed Alan Lazard, and so and it there have been reports that it's likely Cobb goes there. So pretty much the wild card that they haven't really shown a whole lot of interest in is OBJ, and um, I honestly don't think the Jets want to pay OBJ his 20 million a year, but if they really have to, they probably will. They're desperate enough to get Rodgers. Um, so kind of what are your thoughts about that, and what do you think about Rodgers' comments on those reports?
Yeah. Well, you're right on what ESPN reported. Diana Rossini, she did, uh, but she did kind of came back with a comment about what Aaron Rodgers' criticisms of her were and what her reporting was. And when you look at the quotes and you listen to what she actually said, he was taken out of context. She never reported that they were demands. She never reported that at all. Um, in fact, her quote was, "These are players I want to join, or I want to join me in New York, and these are guys like this." So just basically reported what he had already kind of said. And Rodgers himself said, when ownership said, what do you think of these guys? And he's like, yeah, these would be great. Lazard's a great locker room guy. He'd be fantastic to have on the team. I definitely would endorse him. Um, Players do that, and I don't fault them for that, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
But I don't know why he's blasting Rossini about saying that Rodgers made demands, that they got to sign these people. No, there's people in the media that did say that,
Yep.
but she's the one that broke it, and she never said that. If you look at what she said in the interview, so she
Yes.
corrected that, and so I think there's just you know, Rodgers, and he kind of has that little bit of a chip, like um, and if it was told that maybe he never even listened to her interview and he's just taking what other people are saying too, who knows? Because if you listen to what she said, it's not what she said. But regardless, the fact is this. He did say he wanted those players. Maybe he didn't use the word demand, right? But he did say he wanted
Yeah.
them.
Yes,
His
he
words
does
are going
want
to
him.
carry weight. And so, and it's okay, just own it. But again, you got the tail wagging the dog, and that's what I don't like about this. Um, LeBron James from the Lakers wanted Russell Westbrook signed, and
Hmm.
so they signed him. That was a disaster. There was a game in the NBA played where Russell Westbrook took the last shot. I was watching a game in a critical game in a tight game, not critical because they probably aren't, they didn't, where their record is, but it was a critical game at the moment. Misses the shot. LeBron just turns around and walks off the court. Didn't even touch the ball. So the Russell Westbrook experiment did not work, and now you got a player, Aaron Rodgers, who's saying, "I want these guys. I'm going to recommend them." Of course, management and ownership is going to bring them in. That's why they signed Lazard. It's not a coincidence.
Yep.
Nathaniel Hackett's in New York. He said that didn't have any influence on him going there. Really? I think it did. That's why New York signed him. It's definitely a strategy to get him in there. So,
Hmm.
just own it. But I'll tell you, I guarantee you this: these are older players. They're not going to put them over the hump. They could get hurt. They're not going to be a difference maker on the team. I think it's a little bit. If I could see it, I kind of it reminds me of this. It's like when Brady went to the Buccaneers, right? Who did they bring in and sign? His buddy Rob Gronkowski.
Hmm.
Now you could say, well, isn't that the same thing? He was older too and slower. Yeah, maybe you could, but here's the difference to me. He was a piece. He wasn't like he was a small piece of the offense. He had his one or two or three catches and it was good. Um, they didn't overpay for him. They didn't give him 4 years, 444 million. Of course, he was at the end of his career. But
Yeah.
keep in mind they had Mike Evans there, Chris Godwin. They had an outstanding defense, so they had a lot of the structure already built. And I think that's what New York thinks right now. I think they finished 7-10 last year, but I think they're looking at it as could have we got eked out 3, 4 more wins or 5 wins with Rodgers. That's probably what they're thinking. And they do
Yeah.
have a good defense with Sauce Gardner on the team, and they got some young receivers, and if they bring in some veteran receivers, so I think that's what Rodgers is thinking. But anytime you got a player coming in and making personnel decisions, it usually is not a good thing
Yeah.
because GMs are good at that. Players usually are not. They think with their heart, and all these guys have one thing in common: they're all buddies and friends of Aaron Rodgers, and which is fine. But is it because they're going to make our team better, or is it because I want to bring them in and you know they've always had my back, and one thing Rodgers is he's loyal to his inner circle and to his people, and
Yep.
this is a way to show that loyalty. But is it going to win you a championship? I don't see it.
Yep. And he said at one point that he was gushing over Nathaniel Hackett and saying
Hmm.
he was the best, as good as any coach he's ever had. Then he uh, and then he said that he just happens to be with the Jets. He just happens to be the offensive coordinator of the
Right.
Jets, and I kind of
Wow.
laughed when I saw that because I was like, yeah, that can't be a coincidence because um, that's obviously a main reason he's there because he just got done saying that he's one of his favorite coaches, and then he's
Mm.
like, yeah, it's great. He just happens to be coordinator for the Jets, and so yeah, it didn't certainly didn't work for the Packers. Cobb wasn't really that big of a deal. He's a lot older and slower.
He
So,
is. Yeah. Love Randall Cobb too, by the way. I mean, he had that
yep.
outstanding game against Chicago where um, he just caught that last Hail Mary pass at the end of the game to get the win for Green Bay to defeat Chicago again and get into the playoffs. And it's just, yeah, he's been a phenomenal player.
Hmm.
I've always really enjoyed watching Randall Cobb. So when I'm talking about Cobb and Lewis and Lazard, it's I like these players. Um,
Hmm.
and I really enjoyed Aaron Rodgers as a Packer. But I think he's done a lot of great things with the organization, for the organization. He's been the fans have loved him, and he'll retire as a Packer. He'll be in the Ring of Honor, and people will applaud when he comes back, as long as he doesn't go to Minnesota. And and people will enjoy that. And and I'm sure they'll welcome him back with open arms. But um, it's it's a business, and he understands that too, I think. But I do think Green Bay is just, again, if he's saying these things to the Jets, I want these players back. He's saying those things to the Packers too, and Green Bay doesn't want to do that. So now we have an issue, and I think that's why they're moving on. They both want to go a different direction, and then you got Love lurking. Um, 5 games into the season, we're going to look at that and go, man, are we glad they went with Love? That's what I'm hoping happens.
Yep.
And he's going to come out and he may. Then again, the first year Rodgers started with the Packers, he had a losing season. They didn't. And we can have that with Love. Or we may finish and not make the playoffs like we did this year. 7, 8 wins. But if
Hmm.
that happens, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Because if you can see the trajectory going up with Love, and you can see him
Hmm.
getting better week in and week out, and the team is growing around him, and the receivers are
Yeah.
getting another year under their belt, and they're getting stronger as the season goes, that's not a disappointing season. But if we
Yeah.
kept Rodgers and missed the playoffs, that would be a disappointing season.
Yep.
So I can't expect Love to take the team to the playoffs the first year, but if he does, that's just the cherry on top.
Yeah, it
Um,
is.
we'll just keep building on it. But good luck, to the Jets. 7-10 last year. When you look at their division, Landry, you look at the Bills finished 13-3, Dolphins were
Hmm.
9-8, Patriots were 8-9. The Bills are still the cream of the crop in that division. And I looked at the schedule, not schedule, but the AFC, and just like what teams will make the playoffs again. Of course, there's 4 division winners, 3 wild card. Um, do I think the Jets make the playoffs? If Rodgers stays healthy, yeah, I think they can. There's question marks with Miami and Tua and his health. There's question marks with the Ravens. Where does Lamar go? Does he stay? So there's a lot of question marks with some of the teams,
Yeah.
but I think the Jets will make the playoffs. I just don't know how far they'll go, as I think there's so
Mm.
many better teams in the AFC. It's a tough conference.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I do really like Cobb as well.
Hmm.
I think he's great. I'm not a huge fan of OBJ, but he's never played with the Packers, so I was okay with Rodgers liking him. But
Hmm.
yeah, I did like Lazard Lewis, and like Roger said, they are great locker room guys, and that's the main reason. That's why they're so valuable, and whenever they can provide um, a little bit of help on the field as well as complementary options, that's always great as well. But whenever you're overpaying them, um, just because they're Rogers buddies, that kind of hinders you from going out and building your team and going and getting those younger guys. And also they don't get as much playing time when Rogers wants Randall Cobb on the field as well. So
Right.
those guys can certainly provide a little bit of something, but I wouldn't want to be paying them a lot of money to do so because they're they're just not quite worth that much anymore. Um, so we'll just yeah, I think the Jets will be pretty good. I'm not sure if they'll get a whole terribly far in the playoffs. I don't. There's definitely a lot of teams I think are ahead of them. But yeah, with Love, the Packers, I'm really excited for that. And honestly, the Packers still have a really great roster. There's not a whole lot of holes. They got to work on the tight ends,
Hmm.
the tight end position, kind of rebuild that. They got to look at safety because we don't know about Adrian Amos where he's going. Savage hasn't been was benched during the season, so we don't know about him. It looks like they might try to move him to the slot, give him more playing time there. Um, a move that was great. They did bring back Keyshawn Nixon, which was
Mm.
pretty much
Yeah.
their their main their main goal during the off season. They didn't really do a whole lot while waiting for Rodgers' decision and figuring out what they were going to do with that. But they did re-sign Keyshawn Nixon, and I think that was a very good move. What are your thoughts on that?
I was excited about that. Yeah, he added a spark to the special teams for sure. And so um, when he signed, I was pretty happy about that. So I think that was a great move. Um, anytime you can get a returner that's electric like that can really field position changes the pace of the game so much. It's so valuable to have a guy like that, and he was good for the time we had him in that position. It wasn't all year, but when he got the chance, he shined, and I think that was a very smart signing.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought so as well. And they didn't have to pay him a ton of money.
Hmm.
Um, but it is only a 1 year deal, so it's not like it's gonna be long term. And if he does it again, he's definitely gonna have a huge market, and so it could be tough to re-sign him again. But with Rodgers being gone, you might be able to work on re-signing some of those players, extending some of those players with the extra cap space that you'll get eventually
Hmm.
after this season. So, uh, oh, and by the way, Keyshawn Nixon, I think also was a pretty nice starter at slot cornerback too. Logged a good many snaps there, and I thought he was pretty solid. Not fantastic, but um, he was solid, and it's kind of what you're looking for. So if you have him and Savage kind of manning the slot, I think that would be pretty good because I think they both can provide some quality snaps there. So now that we're on the subject of the defense, we did get a voice message um, that was last week on the show. Got that voice message and I played it on the show. And so about it was about Joe Barry and
Hmm.
how the defense has not been very good um, since he became defensive coordinator. He's going into his third season now with Green Bay as the coordinator, and LaFleur seems to be kind of loyal to his guys as well. And he decided he's gonna bring back Barry for another season. So what do you think it's gonna be? What do you think it's gonna be like with Barry? I'm not sure their defense. There's so much talent on defense, and we had such high hopes for them. We thought maybe they'd kind of help the offense out getting started because they were going to be a little bit slow with the new receivers and everything. That didn't really happen. They were a little bit better down the stretch, and that could have saved his job, as was said on the voice message. But just what are your thoughts on that? And do you think the defense will be able to improve this year?
Well, I think all fans were probably shocked that Joe Barry was retained. Everybody
Mm,
expected that he would be gone. We held on to Dom Capers longer than we should have. We finally
yeah,
made a change there. And Pettin, he wasn't much better, Mike Pettin.
no,
And now we have Joe Barry. And yeah, we decided to retain him. And LaFleur's words were um, complimentary of Barry. He said, although it wasn't always pretty, I did think we started to improve as the year went on. That's his quote. I thought we saw more of an identity. And I certainly thought we played well enough to win on the defensive side of the ball. Um, and down the stretch, they did. Um, they had a 4 game win streak. So everybody's like, oh, so Barry's doing fine. Um, but if you look at the teams they played, it was against the Bears and Justin Fields. Tua suffered a concussion in one of the games, but remained in there, and so that was a game that Green Bay's defense did well, but again, Miami was limping in that game. Baker Mayfield was the quarterback when we played the Rams.
hmm
And then Kirk Cousin, of course, he always self-destructs. I love it. But anytime the Vikings self-destruct, by the way, I love that when they lost to
Yep,
the Giants. That was my Super Bowl.
yeah, that was great.
Loved it. Yeah. And the Vikings, yeah, have they won any Super Bowls yet, Landry? I can't think. Oh wait, no, they haven't, have they? No.
Nope.
Anyway, all right. Sorry. I just got to get those things in there. But um, so yeah, I, that may have saved his job. but I don't think that would have been enough. I think there's players that regressed in the season. Um,
Yeah,
you know, Douglas, Stokes, Amos, they all kind of regressed. And then of course you had injuries to Rashawn Gary.
yeah,
So you had that. So I think as a coach, then as when LaFleur backs Barry and says, no, we're gonna give him another year. Um, he's really kind of putting himself out on a limb because if this doesn't work out, that this is on
hmm,
LaFleur then, and then people are going
yeah,
to start questioning him. So he's really taking a risk. And then LaFleur and Barry also, they coached with the Rams together. So sometimes it's hard to get rid of a friend, or to make that change
yeah,
because you believe in him, and that's why you hired him. And he thought, you know what, maybe he'll turn it around. It's not all him, is what I'm trying to say, right? It's some of it is maybe just not having the right players and or the personnel. And so let's build that. You look back at the 49ers when they had Robert Saleh. Do you know that there was people that wanted him fired because their defense wasn't very good, and they kept him. And then now look, they're a top defense, and now he's a head
yeah.
coach in New York. Do I think that's going to happen with Joe Barry? Probably not.
No,
Probably not. But it can happen, right? And I think that's
yeah,
what's in LaFleur's head. And I think that's why he's retained him. I think he thinks, and then there's something about consistency, right? You don't want to change defensive coordinators
yeah,
every couple of years. And that's what Green
yep,
Bay's kind of
that's
in that
true.
rut. And I think they just, we need some consistency here. Let's not fire and just hire somebody. Um, but boy, there's been some good ones that have been hired, the Vikings, you know, um, they hired a defensive coordinator that was the coach in Miami, and now his name escapes me, but maybe you can help me out. Brian Flores, there it is,
Yep,
Brian
that,
Flores,
yeah,
and I
that's
thought that
right.
was a great hire. He's a good defensive coordinator, so
Yes.
we'll see how it works out for him. But I'm hoping it works for Joe Barry. I really do, but the dude's got to make some adjustments during the game. Um,
Hmm.
Not let Justin Jefferson run all over the field and put Jair on him one on one, and just let's change it up if
Yeah,
it's not working. That's what was so frustrating for fans.
yeah.
Ryan Tannehill, I was at that game by the way against Tennessee in
Okay.
Green Bay. Tannehill, I mean, Tannehill, he shouldn't have lit us up the way he did,
No, no,
but he
abs.
did.
Yeah,
I don't know the numbers. I don't remember them because I try not to think about it. But that
yeah.
was the most frustrating game when Tannehill came in
Yes.
and just ran over us. And that's not the defense we want to have. But
Nope.
so I'm a little nervous about the defense. I'm not going to lie. So we'll have to see how it works. But yeah, again, LaFleur, I think, put a target on his back a little bit there. And we'll see if it pays off. But I have my doubts.
All right. So, just to get into a little bit of free agency and draft stuff here, a little bit. Well, first off, the Packers. I did see that they were attempting to re-sign Amos. Um, so, um, we'll see where that goes. That wouldn't be a bad move, to me
Mhm.
if they could get him cheap enough. But I don't want to. That's another guy I don't want them to overpay for because he was one of the guys who regressed some, and so I don't want to see them paying him too much, especially if he doesn't bounce back. But give him a little bit of a prove it deal type
Mhm.
thing. Get him back for another year or two. That would be okay with me. But there's other veteran safeties out there that they could potentially get for cheap, and I put a pool out there on Spotify like I do for every episode, and
Mhm.
I voted on it, which I also do every week. It just
Hey, you can
um
do that. You're the
yeah,
creator of it. So,
exactly. It's a fun thing to do. So I voted for Julian Love,
okay.
and there was also Von Bell, Taylor Rapp, Juan Thornhill, and John Johnson III, all free agents. John Johnson was released by the Browns,
Hmm.
and the question was, which of these veteran safeties do you think the Packers should go after in free agency?
All
And
right.
so that was my list of five there. And
Well,
so which one do you think they should go after?
Well, we can cross Thornhill off too because he signed with Cleveland, right? So I think
Exactly.
he
Yep,
replaced Johnson, who they released. So really, it comes down to Bell, Love, and Rapp. And
it
I like
does.
your pick with Love, and I'll tell you why. He's 25 years old, and he started all 16 games last year. So
Yep.
he's an ascending player. I think he's a
Hmm.
guy, but I'll go different though. I'll go Taylor Rapp, and the reason why I like Rapp between him and Bell. Bell's 28, Rapp is 25. Rapp, of course, played for the Rams, second round draft pick in 2019. Um, and he's had a bit of an up and down player. He is, but he's 25. So I still think that he could still put it together and again upside for that. So
Yeah.
I think if one of those two that'd be fantastic. Now we'll see. I always One thing with Landry that I've always learned is I always get my hopes up on a free agent signing, and then
Hmm.
we never get them.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
that always seems to happen. In fact, Love is visiting Seattle. um, I think he's going there. Today's Thursday, so Thursday is the 16th of March here. That's when he was going to Seattle to visit them. So
Okay.
he could be another one off the list.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's we can wish, right, and hope. But that's
Yeah.
that's what I would like to see have happen.
Yeah. I would expect him to get some interest after the way
Hmm.
he played last year. Um, Although I have been a little bit surprised that he hasn't received any more already, with everyone, all the top free agents flying off the board here with this free agency frenzy. Um, so yeah, when I put that poll out, Juan Thornhill was still a free agent, but he is
Hmm.
not anymore. So yeah, there is only four options at this point. Let's let's talk some other positions in free agency. Tight end is a major one, and they could possibly add a veteran receiver, although I do think they might look to the draft a little bit more to address that. Looking to go younger, but it's possible they add a veteran receiver as well. Any veteran wide receivers out there? I mentioned that I liked Jacoby Meyer, Jacoby Myers in um, a one of the last few episodes, I believe, and him and Juju Smith-Schuster have signed
Hmm.
with teams. Um, Jacoby Myers to the Raiders, and then Juju Smith-Schuster to the Patriots to kind of replace Myers. Um, I can't think of any others off the top of my head that have been signed. But there are some others out there. Are there any um realistic options that you could get cheap that you think would be good for the Packers to sign?
Yeah, it's pretty slim out there. I mean, Michael
Yeah,
Thomas, was a name we brought up last time we talked, but he re-signed an incentive-laden deal with I believe the Saints. So
yeah,
so he stayed there. Um, Adam Thielen was released, but we don't want Adam Thielen.
no, no,
I'm not interested. No thanks. Let's stick with what we have. But um, sometimes you see veterans get cut and they don't make it. Maybe that's where Green Bay picks up a player,
yeah,
something like that. But I just don't see them going out and making a big splash. Robert Woods signed with
hmm,
the Texans, so I just don't. When you look at the names that are out there, none of them really woo you, right? They don't. I mean, there's Jarvis Landry, Darius Slayton from the Giants, McCole Hardman. He's kind of interesting from the
yeah,
Chiefs. Paris Campbell from the Colts. But um, I think when you look at those names, there's DJ Shark, or Chark, I should say. Um, yeah, I just don't see Green Bay signing any of those guys. I think they're going to continue
hmm,
to develop Watson
yeah,
and Dobbs, and then of course you got Torrey. And then
yeah,
whatever they get in the draft, and I think, I could see him maybe signing another receiver that gets cut, like I said earlier, from a team. But
yeah.
I'd be shocked if they sign any of the guys I just mentioned.
Yeah, I would as well. Especially wide receivers, they
Hmm.
don't sign a lot of veterans
Yep.
in that department. But I think if anyone if they signed any of those, it would be probably either Slayton, Chark, or Hardman, just because they're
Yeah.
probably looking for speed, and those guys have that.
I
Um,
Hardman would be my favorite of those.
yeah, probably, yeah,
Yeah.
and he could possibly help with returning as well. I believe he did return kicks or punts or both with the Chiefs, and he's got some major speed. Uh, so let's go to the draft here right quick. Um, any tight ends, safeties, receivers. I believe they'll probably draft a receiver, two or three. And they always like to draft offensive linemen, so they'll probably do that. Um, I I think maybe probably the most likely position they would sign a vet free agent from would be the safety position, just because there's not a whole
Hmm.
lot of options in the draft. Um, but it's a good tight end class, so um, that could be interesting, and some good mid round guys there at tight end. So, what are your thoughts on the draft classes, mainly for tight end, safety, receiver, and who do you like, and who do you think the Packers could pick?
Yeah. There's that's what's interesting when you look at all the mock drafts that are out there and you see like who could be available. And do you ever go through those and you read them all and you see, the first few picks they usually get spot on. And then after you
Yeah.
get past pick 13, 14, 15, it never stays the
Mm,
same. And
nope.
it's just anybody's best guess, right? It's just hard to see a draft board of how the Packers, would rank their certain players. I can tell you the players that fall down into that 13 to 15 range, are, your offensive tackles, which you could see Green Bay do, right? Because
Hmm.
offensive linemen, because Bakhtiari's hurt, and is he going to
Yeah.
be the same player he once was? So I could see Green Bay really getting a solid guy there to protect Jordan Love, in that
Yeah.
draft pick. That's not a flashy pick, but it's a solid
No.
pick, right?
Yes,
And
it
to
is.
me, Super Bowl teams and playoff teams, if you can win on the defensive line and on the offensive line, you're going to win a lot of
Yep.
football games.
Yep. We
You
saw
can
that.
control that,
Yep. We
right?
saw that. Eagles and Chiefs both
Right.
had good lines.
That's where we have BJ Raji, remember him? And he was just
Yeah.
like an anchor. And that's what you need. You can have all the flashy playmakers on the outside, receiver, tight end, all that. But if you can't protect your quarterback, or you
Hmm.
can't blow open holes for your running back, Aaron Jones, to run through, and
Hmm.
AJ Dillon, I mean, it's going to be a long day. So you do
Yep.
need that anchor, and I think Green Bay would be smart to address that. Um, if you want to go flashy and you want to say, who could they get? If they do get two first round picks, from one from the Jets and one that we have, you could afford to be a little bit more flashy, I guess. I suppose you could maybe get that offensive lineman and you could get a that receiver. Uh,
Hmm.
the top receivers that I've been reading about have been like Jordan Addison from USC. They have him going around pick 17 in some drafts, so he could be where Green Bay would be.
Hmm.
Um, but I think you're going to see a lot of quarterbacks go first, just
Yeah.
because there's so many teams that need quarterbacks, and sometimes that's
Yeah.
where I'm glad that we're not that team because sometimes you
Yep.
reach, and then you draft that
Hmm.
quarterback in that
Yeah.
first round that you just because you need it, but it's probably not the best player you could have taken. But if you let them
Hmm.
slide, then you have that in the back of your mind. So I
Yep.
think we're in a good spot. The more quarterbacks
Yeah.
that go off the board, the better choices we're going to have as it gets down to Green Bay.
Yep. For
But
sure.
that's where I would see the strength. That's where I would see them draft probably would be offensive line.
Yeah. That's probably uh yeah, that's definitely where they where I could see them going with that. Um so yeah, we do know kind of how they draft, and it seems like Brian Gutekunst likes athletic guys, big guys. Size and athleticism is what he seems to like the most, and he also likes guys who are young.
Hmm.
Um, so that's kind of where he likes to draft. I would love to see them draft Jackson, Smith and Jigba, from Ohio State.
Hmm.
He's a slot guy and got a lot of talent. Best receiver in the class, and it's very possible he
Hmm.
could be drafted before the Packers um, are on the clock. But I think that would be cool. Um, so what's your favorite tight end out of this group that they could draft?
Um, I guess, are you talking in the draft or just in free
Yes,
agency?
in the draft.
In the draft? That's a good question. I know that when you look at, there's a guy out of Notre Dame. What's his name?
Michael Mayer,
That's who it is.
however you
Yeah,
say
I
his
think,
last name.
yeah, I think he's the top of the class.
Yeah.
I think, that that's a guy that I think could bring a lot of excitement to Green Bay. Um, um, I was reading a report where it said, that there could be 7 tight ends taken by the end of day 2. So it
Yeah,
feels
there
like it's
could
a
be.
rich tight end draft class this year.
Yeah.
So I think, but Michael Meyer, I think is probably the one that comes to my mind. Um, he's he's a guy that can get downfield. I think I was reading he had 20 receptions on targets of 10 yards plus down the field. So this is a
Okay.
guy that can stretch
Yeah.
the field. He's got a little speed, and
Hmm.
I think he's in a good football program, and I think
Yep.
he could be a guy that Green Bay could look at. Um, so, but again, it's just so hard to say. It's just there's so many needs that Green Bay has. Even corner. So do they draft a corner instead? At
Hmm.
that that's why it'd be so nice to get that. I keep saying it, but I just really wish and hope that we can get that number 1 pick out of the Jets for Rodgers. I think it's worth that because
Hmm.
um, we'll see if they're willing to part with that. But if we don't get a 1 for Rodgers, I think that's going to be a fail on our part.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think out of the tight ends, if I'm looking at
mhm.
day two guys,
Yep.
I'm thinking maybe um I like well actually another guy that would go pretty early if I was gonna pick one of those. I think other than Michael Meyer, I think maybe
Hmm.
Dalton Kincaid from
Hmm.
Utah State. He's got some pass catching ability, and Sam Laporta wouldn't be too bad of a pick. And if you're looking for a good um, combine guy, that was great. An athletic guy with size. You're looking at Darnell Washington, and
Hmm.
from what I've heard, he can block, and which the Packers might not be looking to draft a guy high that isn't quite as good as a pass catcher, but
Hmm.
um, I think he does have that upside. Can catch some passes. So I guess we'll see what happens in the draft, but again, it should be interesting. And I do know one of their big needs in the draft is edge rusher with Rashawn
Hmm.
Gary not knowing when he's going to come back. And there's a good many of those, and I could definitely see them drafting an edge rusher in the first round. They like to do that. Did that with Rashawn Gary when they still had Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith, and they were both um, and then they both played well, and he didn't even play that much his first season, but now they got a great edge rusher, and the class is full of them again this year. So I could definitely see that happening as well.
Yeah. And we could get excited about that. There's some talent in that class that Green Bay could definitely improve on that. So um, Lucas Van Ness from Iowa is a guy that
Yeah,
I've read that could fall to them at number 15 overall. Um,
yep, I really like him.
yeah. Um, Over the past 2 years, he's had about 13 sacks, and so he could even develop behind guys like Rashawn Gary or Preston Smith and
Yeah.
eventually become the starter. So, but if you're drafting a guy that high, you want him on the field sooner than later.
Yeah.
But I think that he could be a good player. So I think, yeah, it just depends on how the draft goes, and how they rank these players on their board. I would tend to agree with you, though. I don't see him taking a tight end in the first round with that high of a pick. You're not getting George Kittle or Kyle Pitts type player, I think, in the tight
Yeah.
end. So I think it
Hmm.
would be more of a round two, maybe even a
Yep.
three,
Yep.
where you could
Same.
see him do that. I think there would be other needs that would be more important. I mean, if you're gonna, I'd rather him just go out and sign Gesicki from Miami, as a free agent,
Hmm.
and then you got that tight end position, covered, and
Yeah.
then that's how you fill those needs. That's what I miss
Mm.
about Ron Wolf. He was not afraid to go out and sign free agents. It's ever since Ron Wolf has left, it seems like we've had a reluctancy to sign free agents,
Hmm.
um, like that. But um, Ted Thompson, he would do it somewhat, but a little more cautious by that. But I think that's just the Packers way. That's what they do.
Hmm.
Keep in mind they don't have an owner, so you don't
Yeah.
see an owner walking into the room saying, "Hey, go get me that tight end."
Hmm.
You don't. There's no owner, and
Yeah.
so that's kind of sometimes Daniel Snyder from the from Washington. He was always like, "Get me this guy, get me this." And sometimes he overspent and he made really poor decisions and
Yeah.
he overpaid for a lot of players. So sometimes it can hurt you too.
Yeah.
But sometimes you do pull the right levers and get the right guy. But it's more of a committee approach, I believe. Even though Gutekunst is the GM, I think it still has to run through Murphy and others, and I think that could be some of what we're seeing here too. There's
Hmm.
just a philosophy Green Bay has. They just don't go out and sign a lot of free agents, and if
Yeah.
they do, they're getting them on the cheaper side. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah. I guess so. It was great having you on the show again. It's great to talk some Rodgers and then be able to get into some of this other stuff, off-season stuff. So I'm really excited for the start of the Love era, and yeah, just can't wait to see him play, and hopefully we'll see some development during the season, and he'll be the real deal and can be in Green Bay for a long time.
Yeah, get your number 10 jerseys,
Yep.
Packer lovers, because you know what is he's gonna be a good player for us. So the jersey, if you want to get a jersey, it's going to be, the lowest price. It would have been lower last year, but the prices are probably starting to go up, but they're really going to start going up
Yeah.
if you you don't get one. So I do think he's going to have a bright future in Green Bay, and it's exciting. I'm not sad about this at all. I mean, this is a new era. I think Packer fans are
Hmm.
ready for this,
Yep.
and yeah, I'm looking forward to this coming season. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Yep. Rogers himself said he's going to be great. So, um,
We'll see. We'll see. Yeah, I, I'll probably I like him. I know there's a lot of people that say, "Well, I'm going to root for him because it's Rodgers," but man, I privately, I kind of I don't. I want us to be right. I want us to be like, yep, yep, he
mhm.
regressed. We
Yeah.
did the right thing. It kind of validates it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
in a kind of a weird way,
Yeah.
I just don't want him to have success and actually go to a championship game, and because then it'd be like, oh. But if he does, he does. But honestly, I just don't see it happening with
Nope.
the quarterbacks and the teams in the AFC. I just think it's going to just be. It could really go the other way, right? It could be if they go 0 and 4. Of course, we haven't seen the schedule yet, but if they lost their first three out of the gate, even New York will not show any mercy to him. He will be booed, and it could get ugly really fast. So,
Hmm.
um, there's gonna be a lot of pressure to play in New York. Let me tell you, it's different than
Hmm.
Green Bay, and the media will not give you a pass. They will turn on you in a heartbeat. So, to me, there's going to be a lot of pressure to win. A lot of pressure.
Yep, for sure. Well, thanks for joining the show,
All right.
and I guess I'll talk to you later.
All right. See you, Landry. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. See ya.